Hello and welcome back to Totally Xed. Today we try to make sense of a workplace that is a cross between an HR seminar and a toddler playdate.
The UN calls it Global Generation Divide. So we are breaking down why boomers think everyone is too sensitive, millennials want purpose like it's a multivitamin, and Gen Z can't decide what they want.
And Gen X, well, we're a little bit like Dory, keep on swimming, keep on swimming. But what we really want is a nap and meetings that start on time. Until then, we take ourselves forward with emotional duct tape and Google Docs.
So let's get started with our unique Gen X point of view on workplace dynamics and how we can make it better.
Hello, Nahid.
Hi, Rashna. How are you?
Very well, very well. So, workplace
Yeah.
in 2025, and
It's a circus.
it is a circus. And I was reading somewhere, and it's true. I never realized it that this is the first time that 4 generations are working together.
That's true. That's true. I actually recently attended an event, and that was the theme that 4 generations of people are in the workplace, and none of them are quite really like the other one.
Yes, they're all different,
They're all different.
and none of them are talking to each other.
Well, yeah, they do, but not the way humans should talk to
Yes.
each other.
Yes, and so it's a perfect storm that's brewing in the workplace.
It is, and boomers are not going anywhere, and Gen Zs are coming and going, and they don't know what they want, and millennials are hard at work, while us,
We are just struggling to, keep the workplace together. I feel like almost we are the generation that's trying to keep everyone working and
Yeah.
functioning together because let's face it, productivity falls if in this scenario, and we're almost like the unpaid therapists in the corporate
that
world.
is so true.
Okay, talk to me. Listen, I'll help you out.
Yeah.
And that
Because
sort of
we
thing.
understand the point of view of the boomers because they are our parents' generation,
Yes.
really. So we understand that. Millennials, Gen Z, sort of like our children or nephews or nieces or whatever.
Yeah, or younger
so we
cousins.
understand, or younger cousins. So we understand that as well. But yeah, we do tend to give a lot for free, including therapy services, which
Yeah.
is strange. Why do we do that?
And it's also, I think, a Gen X thing. I feel this need to fix everything, whether that's
That is true. Control
isn't
freak.
it? Well, let me fix everything. If something's going wrong, let me
It's
fix
this
it.
control thing,
What is this fixing?
With me, it's a
Yeah.
control thing, and I think
Yeah.
it's common in a lot of, especially Gen X women.
It is.
They want to run the show, and
But also, like, I think fixing things as in like, oh, it's falling apart. Let me just fix it and make it better somehow.
Yeah.
This need to make things better.
improvisation as well.
Improvise, and it's so like, okay, so let's talk about boomers in the workplace
Yeah,
and what makes them so special. And then they do bring something to the table.
sure.
They drive us crazy,
Yeah,
but they do bring something.
quite rigid. In my experience, the problem with them, no, nothing against boomers because
Yeah.
my best boss was a boomer. May her soul rest in peace.
Yes.
But they're quite rigid. They need to
Yes.
learn to adapt.
They are so stubborn. They value loyalty and hard work, and those are wonderful things, but the stubbornness and this need to, they actually it's boomers who need to control everything. This need to
Yeah,
feel in
and
control, and and they just don't let go. They refuse to retire. I don't think any of the boomers
Which is fine, because everyone needs a purpose in life, and if they are still contributing to the workplace and the economy, they can stay in the workplace. That
Yeah.
is fine. But we all need to get along. We spend so many hours in the workplace, and we all need to get along. And we are sort of not getting along nowadays.
Yeah.
Workplace has always been thorny, really. Let's face it. But right now, because there are 4 generations with completely different mindsets and views towards how work should be done, I think it's funnier.
I think Gen X is interesting because we have something in common with everyone, like with boomers.
Exactly.
We do value loyalty, and we are ridiculously loyal. I think that's maybe one of our faults is that we're so loyal.
Yeah.
And we're extremely hardworking. But unlike boomers, I think we are very adaptable and we are extremely tech savvy.
I think we were forced to be adaptable because I think in our lifetimes, the maximum number of changes have happened in our
Yeah,
lifetimes
yes.
while we've been, in
Yeah.
education or in early workplaces.
Yeah.
And we've had to adapt. There was no other way. It was survival, really.
It was, and it just became second nature. So whether it was with technology or culture or fashion
Exactly.
and trends and world
Yeah,
politics, it's
you
like
roll
we
with the
just
punches. We just do it, but
yeah
it's second nature to us, I
yeah
think. And I think that brings something to the workplace.
it does, because we are probably the only ones also who are not blaming everyone else. We don't. We get we want to throttle people half the time. God knows I do. But we're not in the blame game. I don't see a lot of things like it's all their
Yeah.
fault, it's their fault.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and you see that in Gen Zs a lot. I'm now working with Gen Zs because they are coming to that level of workplaces where they are making
yeah,
decisions, and it's tough working with them because they can't really tell apart what's urgent, what's an emergency, what can be done later.
yeah.
They're very good at ghosting. They just
So the Gen Zers that I knew before COVID, and it's really interesting because I used to meet these young people and they were like in college or, about to start working. And they were super hardworking, they were focused, they were driven, they had a 5-year plan in front of them, very responsible. And I thought, oh my God, this is like, I would have tears of joy because I would think, they are the children that
they're going to inherit.
they're going to inherit the earth because
Yeah.
they are the children of Gen Xers.
Yeah.
So they've at that time appeared to me like the 2.0 version of us. And
Yeah.
I thought, but better.
Yeah.
And then COVID happened. And I don't know whether that's where the lack of structure happened. And when you're not in a
Probably.
structured environment, your self-discipline kind of falls apart.
Yeah.
It was a very confusing time. And at that time, also, all this social media stuff started floating around. Everything was toxic. Everything was problematic.
It's COVID and social media. Honestly,
Something
I
changed.
think I would blame Gen X blaming things, social media for this a lot because this whole awareness is a good thing, but this over awareness of mental health and how fragile they are, and mental health day. Did we even hear that? And when
Yeah.
we were young in our 20s, that I'm taking a mental health day,
Yeah.
but it happens now. And some of it is good, but it's happening too much. This kind of
It is.
fragility is not good for any human being, no matter what generation.
I was reading somewhere, I think Jonathan Haidt, he called them the most fragile and anxious generation to date. And that's not a good place to be, in the
Yeah.
headspace.
Yeah.
It means, dealing with a stressful situation is going to be difficult. But hey, there will always be stressful situations.
Life
There will
is
always
stressful.
be challenging people to work with.
Exactly.
Things will not always go your way. And I think that
And that's the nature of
inability
life.
to deal with that is
That's
not
the nature
good.
of life. You have to get along with people. There will be stressful situations no matter what.
Yeah.
And just saying that I can't deal with it, or it's impacting my mental health, or I need some time off, because it's happening.
Yeah.
My son, who's a millennial, a young millennial, and a Gen Z who's maybe 4 years younger than him, took 2 months of mental health leave because she couldn't,
Yeah.
take the workplace stress. And I think the concern about professional development is it's a different kind of concern. They're not really, that ambitious in the traditional sense.
And I thought a few years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have said they are super ambitious, and somehow all of that is gone.
Yeah, I mean, ambition, listen, let's redefine ambition as well. In some ways, I also think we have taken work to mean life, which is not positive as well.
Yeah.
So work and life are two separate things. And, life should be really the uppermost in our minds. And Gen Z are doing that well. They know how to live life. But at the same time, everyone has to earn a living.
Yeah.
There's no bank of mom and dad forever, and that's happened as well. So many of them moving back with the
with the
parents.
parents because, and especially now with the current economic climate,
Yeah.
there are not enough jobs to go around.
Yeah.
There are so many companies that are downsizing and laying off people, and I hate the word right sizing. I think it's like the worst word
I know.
ever.
Or rationalizing.
Rationalizing. I mean, that's
Yeah.
really, it's like mean. Like, you're laying off people.
And you're talking about human beings. I mean, what are you
Yeah.
rationalizing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is not the time to be fragile. You do need to toughen up.
Yeah.
And then this whole thing of creating boundaries. I agree. We need boundaries.
No, some of it, I agree with. I really
But
admire that focus on living their lives.
yeah,
But there has to be a balance to everything.
exactly. And then, but for some reason, creating boundaries has become, oh, I can't deal with the situation and I can't deal with this person. Therefore, I'm going to create boundaries. And that those boundaries are actually forming a wall, and they're actually shutting themselves out.
Yeah.
And ignoring a problem will not make that problem go away. You kind of have to deal with
And the
difficult
workplace has
situations or
become
whatever.
trickier because people are scared now. So I work with someone who took 2 months again mental health leave. And when I spoke with their line manager about, some work that was still, of being affected, they said they can't do anything because they were scared to actually
Exactly.
touch that, area where, it may backfire.
Yeah. And I had this really interesting conversation with my brother about, coming back to the office and working.
Yeah.
And he said, well, there's another flip side to it. It's not just a case of boomers saying we can't work, remotely, but it's also economic because companies can't have empty offices.
Of course, yeah.
Real estate, people are saying, well, this is not.
You read about
right.
New York, the whole of Manhattan
you
was
need to
really
They
affected.
had to bring people back into the office,
Yeah.
and some of the companies, the first few companies that made people come back to work were the tech companies. It was like
Which is
companies
so
like Google.
strange when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, they said come back to the office because
Yeah.
of this massive real estate that was sitting there, and like they had to use it.
Yeah.
So that's also reality.
Mm.
But on the other hand, there are millennials
Mm.
who seem to be finding a good balance.
Yeah, they seem to be doing well. They've taken bits of the playbook of boomers. A lot of are,
A lot, yeah.
and they have mixed it up to do their own thing. So I'm quite impressed with the work ethic of the millennials that I work with.
Because this was also that generation that came into the workplace right after 9/11, and there was a period of great uncertainty and insecurity.
Yeah.
It was probably it was a dark time for many years, and then went into a global recession. So those first 10 years of their lives were kind of like shitty.
Yeah.
So I can understand, that when you in that thing, you want to live in the moment.
Yeah.
You want as many experiences as possible, and that need for purpose is also that need for hope, finding hope in a very dark world.
As I said, there's lessons to learn from all generations, and this need for purpose is the biggest one. I think that applies across the board.
Yeah.
So boomers holding on to their jobs, it's the need for purpose, really.
Yeah.
Us trying to, just control the storm, that's again a purpose.
Yeah.
Millennials just trying to find a balance, that's purpose. Gen Z, well, living a life that's sort of very balanced and with no mental stress, that's an impossible purpose, but that is a purpose. But I don't know how that's going to really end because, they are the ones who will be running the show 10 years on.
Exactly. And with millennials, now that they're in their 30s and 40s, they're raising families, they're paying off a mortgage, they've got bills, and they've settled into this the very Gen X space where we will put in the hours where need be.
Yeah.
We want to stick it out in our jobs. We want to create financial security, which is all of us. Recently, I read this article in, I think it was the Times, this English paper, and they did a research. They did a survey.
Yeah.
And this might be just for Britain, but they said 75% of 18 to 27-year-olds wanted long-term jobs. We're now looking at long-term jobs and
that's good
security.
news. That's good news if they're looking for security. Although, we also read, data tells us again and again that Gen Z and younger millennials, they're not interested in buying property or buying a car even, because
They can do
self-driven
without it.
cars are there, transportation modes have
Yeah.
really developed. They're not learning to drive. That's one massive change that's happened in Gen Z.
So true. That is so true. I know so many Gen Zers who don't know how to
No.
drive.
But let's also look at the positives. A lot of Gen Z and younger millennials are the ones who have started really great businesses. They are the startup gurus, really, and we are learning from them on how to start, for example, tech businesses. A lot of
Ah,
them are very young.
but interestingly, so guess what is the age group of the most successful startup founders?
Well,
Generally,
that would be late 40s, 50s.
40s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
That would
they
be Gen
actually
X. Yeah,
are
yeah.
older millennials, yeah,
Yeah.
Gen
But
X. They're the
some of
ones
the
who,
Gen Z
yeah,
started business so creative as well. So I
they
really
do.
admire that
Yeah.
too. And I in my work with universities and students, I see it very often. They're not looking to work as an employment.
They
A
are running
lot of
away from
them
the
are,
corporate
looking
environment.
at
Yeah,
entrepreneurship. That's
yeah,
the aim.
yeah.
So these are final year students, and a lot of them are thinking of becoming entrepreneurs or not employees, which is so non-traditional, when you think about
Yes.
it. Because with our
Yeah.
generation, we were told, okay, just work, get the experience, and then if you want to run your own thing, you can. And I did after 20 years of working, and then I started my own thing. And same with you.
Yeah.
But we didn't really,
But at that
we
time, it
weren't
was
brave
like
enough to,
you stick to the
yeah,
one
a
job,
steady
and
income.
yeah, it was ingrained in
Yeah.
us.
But they get out of university and they just start their own
Yeah.
thing. And some of them are really successful as well.
Yeah.
So,
I think every generation goes through some turmoil in their early years where they're trying to figure
what
themselves
did we
out.
go through?
I think for us, so if you look back, when we were, the earliest Gen Xers,
Yeah.
I mean, older than us, the earlier Gen Xers were
Yeah.
coming, the first Gen Xers to come into
Yeah.
the workplace, were also coming to the workplace in a very, very chaotic time. I mean,
Yeah.
the world was in a flux. There was the Cold War. There was all sorts of, change happening all the time.
Yeah.
Like Cold War, and then the wall, Berlin Wall comes down, and the communism collapses, and something
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
other,
There's
and then
always something happening.
there
Yeah.
was a massive recession
Yeah.
at the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So there was that uncertainty. But we dealt with it differently in the sense that for us, we, unlike millennials who said, okay, we live in the moment,
Yeah.
we said, okay, I'm going to work really hard and save up for the future and have financial security.
Yeah.
And that became our mainstay.
Because we learned it from our parents. We learned it from the
Yeah.
boomers. That's how things were done. We
When-
didn't really have many
Yeah.
options then.
We did.
That's
And
the
then
thing.
also even when we were younger, boomers looked at us like, oh my God, these people,
Yeah.
and there was an eye roll, and those eye rolls.
But
and
that still happens,
It's
Haven't you
still-
worked with 60+
Yes,
year old
I
people?
still get
and,
those eye rolls.
Exactly. I do too. And I'm like, I'm not a young person anymore. What are you doing? But yeah.
So, we had to deal with it then. We're still dealing with it.
And then an eye roll from
You don't know what you're talking
from the
about.
younger ones as well, from the Gen Zers as well, who roll eyes at us and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. So we're getting it both sides.
Yeah. And now with this, the 4 generations, and people are trying to, the generation most likely to be pushed out will be Gen X.
Ooh,
Um,
that
because
sounds
that sounds
not
it's-
fun.
because you've got the younger boomers are not going to go
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
They will hang on to their seats no matter
Yeah.
what. And the ageism is kicking in a lot sooner. So in the creative industry,
Creative
the
industry,
age limit,
definitely. Creative industry is,
It's
if
the
you
worst.
are in your late 40s, you're out, really.
So now apparently for women it's kicking in at their late by 38 onwards,
Ooh,
and they're finding themselves pushed out
painful.
in their mid 40s. I mean, and which is the worst time because you feel you're being pushed out and you have
Yeah.
perimenopause coming in. So and for men it's later, so they find themselves being pushed out in
Yeah.
their mid 50s.
Well, ageism in the workplace, in any case, it's always been there.
Yeah.
But I think for women, and because we
Yeah.
are the generation that we are, I think it's happening with us now. And
It
I
is.
was reading about it yesterday, not employed and not retired. And you're in
Yeah.
this place where,
That French
you,
woman.
yeah, you want
Yeah.
to work. You're 50 something, early 50s, and you want to work and you are capable of working, but nobody will employ you because they think you're too old, but you're not,
Too
old
young to
enough to,
retire.
yeah,
Yeah.
too young to retire. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And you've got so much to give. And yet, and especially pronounced in the creative industries, yes.
And I know so many women who either left their jobs in their mid 40s, mid to late 40s,
Mm,
either switched careers completely
mm.
or became consultants or independent freelance consultants or set up their own small
That's why so
startups.
many small businesses, you see it across the globe,
You've
really.
done it.
I've done it. You've done it.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. You reach a point where, yeah, either the workplace is not accepting you at where you are, or you
Yeah.
are not accepting the workplace because you've had enough of that. And yeah, running your own thing is probably the best thing at
Yeah.
that point.
It
So
is.
maybe we should take a page out of the Gen Z book and do it earlier.
That's probably a very good idea.
Yeah,
I think, the the amount of time and effort we spent in the corporate world, and there is some merit in the corporate world. I have to say,
yeah.
when you work in the corporate
Your
world,
foundation is made there.
yes,
You learn how to work. You learn the ABC
the
of,
structure and
yeah,
this whole self-discipline, and
yeah,
which is why I think for a lot of us, our generation, um, shifting to a work from home wasn't that difficult because we were just disciplined enough to, okay, this is, I'm going to wake up at
yeah,
this time, and this I'm going to work from done, this time to that time,
yeah.
etc.
Or starting our own business,
Yeah.
at least me, I started my own business based on what I'd learned from those 20 years of being
Yeah.
in a workplace. I I don't know how today's 22-year-olds do it straight out of university, but I can't imagine, just having no experience of a workplace
Yes.
and starting a business, because you need to know how, even if you're not working as part of a
Yeah.
team, you're still working with people. You're delivering something for somebody and you
Yeah.
have to work with people.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it's a tricky one, and then you need to know the basics of finance, operations, distribution, marketing. And
Yeah.
yeah, you learn some of it at university, but the real time learning that happens in a
It's
workplace,
at the workplace.
yeah,
I mean, even if somebody wants to become a mechanic, for example, they will go through appropriate training, then they will apprentice themselves to a more experienced person,
exactly.
learn on the job before they actually venture out on their own.
Yeah,
Nobody starts off on their own.
yeah,
And that's a really important point because that apprenticeship or that training ground is
mm,
required. And I don't think people aren't talking about it as much because there's also this thing of we must agree with what they're doing,
yeah,
but we are not really mentoring them or helping them.
yeah. Nobody wants to come across as uncool. Actually, it's the cool thing.
Yes.
There's this perception of
Ha.
keeping up with how things are, and yeah, not appearing to be not clued in.
Yes. And
Uh,
nobody wants to have the tough conversations
and nobody wants to have the tough conversation. That's also
because
true.
you probably get shouted at on social media
Yeah,
or ostracized in the workplace. But
yeah.
we need to have those tough conversations
Yeah, but then
between
we
the
run the risk of
generations.
some Gen Z, having a mental breakdown and then blaming it on you. So,
Yeah.
that happens. That happens in real life, real time. I've seen it happen, and it's a scary place.
Yeah.
Right now, being in a workplace with all these fragile people, I find it a bit scary.
It is. And also, like, I was talking to somebody who worked in HR for many years, and they said the problem with work crisis is that a work crisis, everyone gets involved because of social media.
Yeah,
If it spills out on social media,
yeah,
then there will be no winners in it because everyone's going to take
yeah,
sides. So no matter what has happened,
yeah.
it will never be resolved as effectively as it could have been. As there are so many young people out there who are functioning on assumptions and preconceived notions
Yeah.
and not really seeing
Or
things
knowledge,
for.
or knowledge that they get from social media.
Yeah.
So, it's not knowledge based on
Yeah.
real resources, but it's and
Yeah.
because Instagram totally just tells you again and again
Yeah.
that, you are fragile and your mental breakdowns happen and,
You
all
need
of
to create
that. And you
boundaries.
need to set
You need to,
boundaries. And
yeah.
yeah. So,
Excess toxic. The other thing is problematic. And yes, there are toxic people, genuinely toxic people out
they've
there.
always been there. They've
And they've
always been
there.
there. It's
There
that's
are challenging people
that's
out
life.
there.
It's called life.
But you cannot cut them out. You cannot cut out all of that and pretend
Especially
it
in a
doesn't
workplace. You just work. That's
Yeah.
why it's called work.
happen. Yeah.
You put the work in.
I
Right?
think, yeah.
I mean, toxic people in your personal life, yeah, you need to do something about it. But in workplaces, you just learn to deal with it, really.
Yep. So how do you think we can all work together better? Is there a way of making that happen?
Well, I think there is, like mentorship really works. I think if it's done properly, it
Yeah.
really works. And it's reverse mentorship as well.
Yes.
Because, boomers can learn from millennials, so we can learn from Gen Zs. And, this is an ideal world that I'm talking about. But if that happens, there's so much to learn from each other.
We should be learning from the past as well. And I think be open to change, be open to evolving. And that applies to all generations.
Yeah.
Be open to accepting another person's opinion. You might not agree with it, and especially in the workplace environment, but you need to accept it.
Mm.
It doesn't mean you have to go along with it. Being able to take feedback or criticism. Every critique that you get is not an attack.
Yeah.
It is there to help you be better.
Yeah.
So if you take it in the right spirit,
Mm.
it will only help you.
Yeah.
So I think that's where perhaps we can step in and ease.
No,
younger
I
people
think
into
I
it.
think the key is mentorship, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. But the key is that, and then
Think, like I said, every generation brings something to the party.
so every generation brings something to the table. Boomers have stamina, millennials have heart, Gen Z, well, they have boundaries.
And Gen X has snacks, we have calendar invites, and we like to think we're holding the whole workplace together.
Tell us what you think and how you think we can learn from each other and work productively.
Next time, we talk technology, what we love about it, how we use it, and what we would really like to let go of.